Welcome to the M4 podcast. This is our very first episode, and so thank you for tuning in and for taking the time to listen and to watch and to enjoy this, our very first episode. M4 is all about igniting church planting movements in Europe and, if the Lord allows, other places all around the world. And so today, on our very first episode, we have our very special guests, Øivind and Linda Augland, and so we just want to take some time to introduce them and then learn all about what they have been doing in their lives, and then look a bit about church planting and specifically the start of M4 and how M4 has progressed to where it is today. So welcome, Linda and Øivind.
Thank you.
Good to have you guys. So I'd like to start with Øivind, and then Linda, you can take over. But Øivind, why don't you tell us a little bit about growing up in Norway and life up until and when you found Christ, and take us right up to before you met Linda.
So I'm grown up in Kristiansand. That's a small city, 120,000 in the southern part of Norway. I grew up in a family that has a very good Christian values, but not kind of active churchgoers. But there was planted a church 200 meters from our home, Evangelical Lutheran Free Church. And I was drawn into all kinds of children and youth and scouting ministry. And in that journey, I really met Christ. 16 years old, I had an experience with the Holy Spirit, and I really met Christ. And I grew up in that church, and I became a pastor there. So that's a part of my story. I was drawn into a church plant already when I was young, 9 years old, 10 years old, and met Christ radically when I was 16.
Great. Linda?
I grew up in a 3-generation home with a lot of Christians, aunts and uncles and grandparents, and it was like a strong Christian family going on a farm side. So I'm a farmer's daughter. So for me, going to church was like, that was what you're doing. Like singing in a choir. Me as a family, together with my parents, we attend something called King Kids. That was a missionary work out at the streets of Norway. So for me, it was like being born in a Christian family and grew into the life with Christ.
Mm-hmm. And so you're two Christians, and then tell us about how you met, how you fell in love. Give us all the romance and the details about how God brought the two of you together.
When we were in this King's Kids work, we made some summer camps. And the very first summer camps, this handsome guy here was playing the bass up on stage. And my best friend said, check out this one. Do you know him? And I was like, I don't know him. But yeah, that was the first time I saw Øivind. And he happened to play with his band for a year full-time in Norway, like evangelizing Norway. And I was in the support group of this band. So I was writing letters, sending money, and tried to tease him to get to know me. Mm-hmm. So we used to say, God and me made a plan, and we just...
And I was very happy for God's plan. But I was so I was so spiritual focused in that, and we wasn't allowed, like there were some rules when you are 6 girls and 5 boys traveling together for full time. There were some rules about don't get engaged or don't kind of start a relationship with the other. Mm-hmm. It's like so I wasn't too much in my mind, but in the end of that trip, from the hint from some in the team, I start to understand that maybe I should get to know Linda a little bit better. And we had a summer camp in the southern part of it, where she was and I was, and then we started to talk. And when we ended team, 1st of August, that is probably close to 34 years ago, I proposed and said, what about coming together and being together? And she was more prepared than me, but we said, yes, come on, let's do it. 10 months later, we were married.
Wow. And so you've been married for how long now? Tell us about your family now, how many kids you have.
Yeah, we've been married for 33 years this year. And now we have 4 kids and 2 in-laws, and soon to be 3 in-laws and 1 grandkids. So we are a growing family. We got those 4 kids in 6 years. So it was a busy time in life to do like a church plant and family, growing family. But we look back at it as it's a good time, good time. But it was a busy time in life, absolutely.
So Linda, you have kind of been on, not on the side, but Øivind's out traveling, visiting lots of places. How do you see your role in your relationship, but also in the ministry with M4, that's been going on?
I would say I feel like a host of M4. As it grew in the very beginning, we had a lot of it in our home, and all relation or not connection came into the house and to the garden, and to meet and greet and be like a fuel station. I couldn't be in the front line like the missionary does, but when they come to our place, we like to spoil them and cheer for them and remember them and taking care of them in that environment. That has been, for me, to be involved. That was how I could do it the 10 years last year.
So Linda, you shared about you've seen yourself kind of this role as a host of M4, and I think many people have enjoyed your hospitality, have sat around the table in your home, been invited into your home, and that's just been a wonderful experience. I still will always remember brown cheese being first introduced, there around the table. But then now, where do you see the role? As now M4's gotten bigger, we can't fit around the table anymore. Where do you see the next year for you?
Yeah, that's why I'm taking this year to work full-time with M4, because as it's growing, I can't make it if I don't meet the people. I need to meet the people, to greet them, to work with them. So we're going to travel together, and we're going to explore the new phase of M4. We're going to do some hosting, I'm going to do some facilitating, maybe some couple talks, whatever. I'm open to what God has in store for this year to come.
And if you think about 5 years into the future, 10 years into the future, what do you see? And do you have any dreams or hopes that you would like to see happen?
This is not my strong side, Greg. 10 years from now, I don't know. This last 10 years was more than we could ever dream of. No one of us aimed for this. It was like a fairy tale come true, like a gift. We couldn't see what's coming. So who knows? Only God knows what 10 years will be from now.
Great. Yeah, I think nobody sort of put down a piece of paper and planned out the last 10 years,
Not at all.
15 years. And so that's the exciting part of what God is doing. And I hope 10, 15 years we can sit down and have the same conversation that we went with where God was leading and moving things. So you were together planting a church, and you were young, and you had young kids, and a lot of people in church planting have growing families. Tell us about how was that as a young family planting a church, and how was that it affected your marriage and the stresses that can come and the demands with church planting, Linda?
A lot of the way we built a church was based on our homes. So instead of going out to church, we took church back home. That could involve our kids, because there was a lot of young families as our in the congregation as we grew. So we met on daytime and had like prayer meeting with the kids, like a holy mess. And we did Sunday service every other Sunday, which we still do, because and we are organized in groups. So a lot of the activity was going on in home. That's why we could cope with it. But of course, I was the one to take care of the kids, and I was more in charge of going out. So after 9 years into our marriage, we had this feeling of living in almost two separate worlds. Even though we did church together, I was a lot with the kids, and he had started some traveling and doing a lot of other stuff. So then we take half a year off with the whole family and took a Bible school with Youth for the Mission to kind of find a new common soil for the two of us.
For further on serving together. I think there was different reason behind that. I think we had got 3 kids, waiting the 4th. We started the church, or we started kind of moving to a suburb when we were 23 years old. So he was quite young. We was not so experienced, but I was passionate and we were passionate together. And I think just also getting kids quite soon, and 1, 2, 3, waiting the fourth, just a time to adjust to each other, maybe also reflect on where are we coming from, the past. I think some of the past came up in our life, and we suddenly should start to raise the children together. And I had my values thinking, and she had her values, and we had some tension, and I withdraw a little bit instead of maybe. So we start to kind of getting a little bit more distant to each other. And I just knew that we need to find another way. And I think both of us have things in our life that we need to deal with. And I couldn't deal with that in the pressure, the speed that I was in. So I knew, and people said to me, Øivind, you need to stop, get away, breathe, and get into a common ground. And I think that's, as around 30 years old, and that was some of the best thing we could do. 31 years old when we did that, because we really get time to withdraw, to reflect, to talk about the difficult things that was in my life, in our life, in our life. What do we really want with our life? Not only me, but together. So I think that time of coming together, have time to adjust in a new way, and also put the vision for how do we want to be a family? What are the vision for our family? What are the vision for who we want to be and what we want to do? That was a 4-month, very important time for us.
And what has been for you as a couple, some of the biggest, maybe the biggest disappointment or biggest challenge that you've gone through those years? And then what has been some of the biggest joys that you've experienced, Linda?
Some of the biggest challenge has been, I think, the period of grief in our family. We lost some grandparents in a stage where we also had teenagers. And looking back, I could see that grief kind of didn't make me aware of the needs of my kids. And that was also when they were teenagers. And we two raising kids together, we were a good team, but raising teenagers, the difference in our values really made us not so good players together. So I can remember a year that the feeling of this man, he was kind of distant from me. I knew it was like a winter in the marriage, and I was so much hoping for the spring to come, because it was all more will-based, that okay, we are a family and we're gonna make it through. So to don't give up in those hard areas, that's been the toughest challenge in my life.
Yeah, I think also the difference of our personality. I'm a more straightforward, find solution, make it happen. I'm not really listening. She's much more a listener. She not most understand what's happening. So I think also the kind of, when we got teenage, some of this personality was drawn out, not always in the best way. And I think that's also creates some tension and some hard times also in the marriage that we managed to come through. We did a lot of, we was teaching marriage, other couples and families, and that was maybe our own medicine for always having to talk through things, because we need to talk about it to others. So, and we can even sometimes remember that people thought we were fighting when we are on the front of teaching people, because it was some unsolved problem that gets some feeling out in the midst of the teaching and training of others.
And what about joys? Tell us what's been some of the great joy that you've experienced.
Traveling with the kids as they grew, and got to know them as adults, and see they having fun together and taking care of each other, and a lot of good times around the table playing board games together. That's a great joy to see. We still have good times as a family, even though we're grown-ups together, and that brings a lot of joy to me, to see how they take care of each other. And that's some of my greatest joy, I think.
Yeah, we have greatest joy in family. It's really to journey together and see also our kids develop, even though you sometimes wonder what could happen in the future. You see, and I think one of the things we have said, okay, we want to follow Christ. We can't decide for our kids, but we can follow Christ in our way, what we believe in, and even if there are some resistance in the family, say, oh, we don't want to pray, or why should we open the Bible again? We will say, well, because we think that's important. So instead of forcing, we try to modeling a faith and living out the faith and priorities for the faith. And then it's also a joy to see that kind of that, I would say, especially some of the value systems that we have, they are in the kids. Hospitality, generosity, it's kind of some of the value system goes further on. And that's that's a joy. That's a huge joy.
Yeah, that's that long-term fruit.
Yes.
There's every season fruit, but then it's like when you see those things pass to your children, that has to be a wonderful joy to watch.
And I think for us, one of the we have prioritized family camps for 15 summers together as family. So we have invested in being together, and in that was more national. It's not only local but national. And many of our kids got friends there that are their best friend now. So sometimes I think it's just to see that the kids are engaging with people outside only the local environment, but we really get friends and developing. And I think that has been important. And it's just, the influence of that has been very good to see.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And I can, don't around that often, but I can see that long-term fruit in your lives. Your kids get along. I've seen them, and they've been very friendly and welcoming, and so I look forward into my life to getting to that phase too, to look back and see that long-term fruit when the kids are grown up. And so, Linda, thank you for sharing your time with us, and we just look forward to spending this next year with you in M4, and hope you get to meet everybody that's a part of the M4 family. But thank you for your years of service and your dedication in the role that you've had, and we look forward to the role God has for you in the future. Thank you. Welcome back to the podcast. Øivind, I'd like to take some time now to dive in a little bit more into church planting, M4, all that good stuff. But tell me a little bit, how did church planting come up in your radar? You're in Norway. Christianity-wise, it is one of the more Christianized places in Europe. So where churches are everywhere. So how did church planting come on your radar, and why church planting?
Well, my home was 200 meters from a place where they planted a church. And I was 9 years old. I was a part of helping building just be around there. There was new church was built as a physical building, but it was planting like in the year before, and they started scouting there. And I become a part of that, and then youth ministry. So I was drawn into a church plant because my denomination planted churches in the city, and there was a vision for planting churches. So when I grew up in that church, I heard about church planting as a natural thing. And when the senior pastor, who was a pastor there, saw me, he saw, well, this guy has something in him that he maybe could do something. And we did some, I went to a theological seminar, it's called Ansgar School, and there I had some church planting thing. And already in 1991, that was 23 or 22, I went to a second European Dawn church planting conference. So I was kind of in that local church, drawn into church planting because there was a context where churches were planted. So that was in some way in that church natural. So when I was 21, 22 studying, that pastor kind of recognized something in me and said, well, what about you planting church? And I thought, that's a natural thing to do.
You mentioned Dawn, and that was something that people maybe from the 90s would know about, but there's a little bit about how Dawn influenced you and how that was a part of your story in Norway.
Yeah, absolutely, because I get in contact, because some of the school saw something in me, and they sent me to the second European Dawn conference. Dawn is the acronym of discipling a whole nation, or sunrise. Dawn is the sunrise. So it was like a vision to see a sunrise or a discipling a whole nation, a national strategy. And I saw that in 91, in 93, I connected more. And we did a dawn research in Norway. I did a dawn research for our southern part of Norway. And in 95, there was kicked up the first National Church Planning Congress from all denominations in Norway. And I become the secretary of that group in the age of 25 years old, because someone just drew me into it, and I was interesting, and I showed my willingness to serve. And that conference, we saw that both the bishop of the faith church and the bishop of the state church of Norway, they came on the same stage and say, we need each other and we need to plant churches in Norway. And that was a breakthrough, because when these people can do and say the same thing on the same stage, it kind of opened up spiritual doors that was imaginable. It was on all the newspaper. And I was a part of that. So that where I also become a part of kind of the national movement of Norway. And I run the national conference from 95 to 2004. I run 5 national conferences. I was the one who arranged them or took leadership in getting it done and making it happen.
Wow. So then the question that people often ask is, why not, we have these old churches or existing churches. Why not just revitalize those? Why do we still need new churches in 2024?
That's a good question. I believe we need to revitalize. I think we need to kind of help the old churches to be on mission and be more missional. But it's not an either or. In my world, it's never an either or. We need both and. And only to see in our city where we have saturated the city with local churches in every suburbs, even 1 or 2 or 3 churches in every suburb. Mm-hmm. And we see in the last 12, 15 years, we have grown more than the population. And think of that. You have 17 churches from 2 denominations in a city of 120 people. The levels of more people have come to faith. There are hundreds of leaders and elders who have taken place in the local churches or in boards or leadership. So you really multiply disciples and leaders and new communities on all levels by planting new churches. So you engage totally much more people. If no one had had that vision, I would not be in the leadership I am. Mm-hmm. If someone saw something and they gave space. And church planting is really a missional engagement of giving space for people to reach people in other area, geographical area, social, cultural area, and ethical area, to plant, I will say, community of faith under the lordship of Christ into every space.
And it seems there's a lot of great things going on in Kristiansand and in Norway. Tell me a little about the picture as you see all of Europe, which is, sometimes we use this word Europe and it's like that it's one thing, but how do you see the picture in Europe or maybe different areas or regions?
Yeah, well, I don't think anyone has the understanding of the whole picture, because honestly, it's, you had the southern, more Catholic Europe, you have the northern Protestant Europe, you have the Eastern Orthodox Europe, you have the mixed Balkan. And because of language, we're very tribalized. So even, the French have no clue about what's happening in Germany because there's no communication. Mm-hmm. You don't communicate in English, you don't need... But in general, what's happening in Europe, I would say immigrant churches are the most growing church planting movements in Europe. It's a lot of new churches, both ethnical, more specific in their tribes and tongues, but also intercultural churches. Among the Iranians, Syrians, a lot of happening. So the whole intercultural environment, it's really growing. At the same time, there are denominations that has focused on church planting, like in Germany, the Free Evangelical, the Pentecostal, AOG, the same in different nations. So there are some denominations who have focused on church planting, have quite a harvest and success in that. And in general, there are pockets of things coming up. And I believe, especially among a young generation, I think we are moving, I call it a pre-Christian time, where we are moving in to see a young generation, that the Gen Z, the Gen Alpha, that are reap and ready for something new. we see now in Norway that all the Bible schools are increasing, and there is increasing number even of the 18 to 30 years who come back to the state church. It's triple in 5 years. Who have been out of the bed coming back, but also coming back. So there is an increasing something happening in the young generation. I believe that is the future, to invest in that young generation.
Where do you see, briefly, the one highlight or one hot spot of church planting in Europe right now? And where do you see where things have been, are maybe the toughest?
Well, I believe Germany and UK are two of the areas that really are boiling more, and that we will see more and more the next 5-10 years happening in these two nations. I think there are some good things happening in Norway, but it's small scale, absolutely. So I think there are two nations. Ukraine is in war. At the same time, when you talk with people, there are more people coming to Christ than ever because of the situation. So I think also Ukraine will be a nation that a lot of change will happen, and it's an openness for the gospel.
Right. So take us back. How did M4 come about? Tell us about the birth of M4. From you're in Dawn doing some things in Norway, local church pastor, local planner, but then what happens that instigates M4 and then becomes where it's gotten to today?
That's a good question. We never planned M4, but the reality is that I was the kind of secretary in the what we call the Dawn movement that later became the Sent in Norway, or ikke not the Sent, but Sent Norway, and that is a church planting collaborative movement in Norway. We have had that process for 30 years, since 93 to 2023-4 now. But in 2004, I took the leadership of it. So I took the leadership of the national movement. In that process, we start to evaluate church planting or the training of church planter. And in that evaluation, we come to a conclusion that we have invested a lot in but not so much in the we and the team, and a lot before they was going into church planting and not when they were planting the church. So we start to develop a training in 2009-10 that took the lesson learned, the hard question, and one of the guy in the room, we were like in 2008 and 8-10 people start to evaluate and reflect, and that become the development of M4. He said, well, everybody can be planting a church, but not everybody is a church planter. So let us create a training around the Great Commission, because the Great Commission is for everybody. And that's where the 4M comes from. That was not me. It was a brilliant brain of another guy of church planting in Norway that said, so what about master? I'm giving you no power. Jesus is the one who starts, who convene, who builds, who sustain. He's the initiator, he's church, and it's his church. It's Christ center. So he's the master. And then mission, go therefore. It's all about mission. And then multiplication. Because if you don't multiply disciples, Jesus said, teach them to obey what I have commanded them to do. And if you don't start to make disciples of the first unit of your church, or even create a culture of disciple making within the first unit of the church, you will not have a growing church long term. So disciple making and multiplying disciples was important. So master, mission, multiplication, and then movement. I'm with you all the day. God has a bigger plan. So we formed a training around that, and we never intended to go out of Norway. But there was a bishop, Peter Sporgis in Latvia, who asked me, because I had a friendship there, and he asked me, can you come and help us? I want to plant 100 churches. We together wrote a vision for the Baptist Union of Latvia. I was with him for 1 week, and then he said, and you're going to do it, and you're going to help me. So I said, okay, that was like in 2010-11, and I said, well, I have something we have developed in Norway. And more or less, M4 was co-developed from the starting process of Norway and in Latvia parallel. So I will say Latvia had a huge influence on the developing of M4, especially they did all the graphic design with the guy Yanis they made M4 into something more than just relationship. And so we wrote 2 books and they made all the graphic design and help. That was like in 2013, something like that, 10, 11 years ago.
And
so that was
the
early start. And from there, I was asked, together with a guy called Raphael Ansberger from France, to lead something called European Leadership Forum church planting network. So I went there and started to lead that network. And through that network of European Leadership Forum, I met a lot of people who started to ask the same question. Could we start M4 in Czech? Could we start M4 in Estonia? So from 2012 to 15, we started M4 with teams from Norway, serving into the nations, doing learning community with them 4 times in Sweden, in Estonia, in Latvia, and Czech. And that was kind of, suddenly it went out of nowhere.
So tell me then, so it's moving, growing, going to different places, all relationally. How did you grow a team that would help do that work beyond just yourself? You took Norwegians with you. Tell me the process about building a team to help go where God has been leading you for.
In the beginning, it was Norwegians who came and served. But then during that 2013, 14, 15, you met very nice people like Craig Hammer in Estonia and Teo Bonesco in Estonia and Liva in Latvia and Jiří Unger in Czech. And suddenly we invited people to say, oh, something more is happening. We need to serve together. So in that sense, we draw in people of resources with skilled people from different nations, and we start to form the first draft of a potential team in that kind of 2011, 12 to 15 of M4. But it was after 15 when we asked the nation to say, well, we come to you, give yourself at least 5 years to start the M4. In the 5 years, make it indigenous, and then we would say, give it away. And that was maybe, I didn't knew that was brilliant to say, but it probably was. Because then Latvia went to Siberia and St. Petersburg, and because some of you from Estonia had contact in Romania, you went to Romania, and the Czech went to France with the help of Swedish, and suddenly we start to serving nation.
Mm-hmm. So tell me a little bit about your leadership philosophy with the growth. Some would say, that you put the map on, where's the most people, we go there, very definitive and strategic in that way. But you're speaking about a different type of strategic leadership, more going with where things are going. So how do you, what is your leadership philosophy in that way in managing this growth?
Don't mess up what God is doing. Keep away. No, it's more relational. That's I'm a relation convener, so it's also from who I am, and for me it has more or less say to God, if you do this, I will try to steward it the best I can, but it's your responsibility. Financial responsibility, ministry. It's like leading in a relaxed way, feeling that this is not something I have. Honestly, I have not either prayed for it or planned it, but God did something. And when God does something, I'm always say, okay, if I steward in the best way I can, what can you do? How can you continue it? So that's kind of, but it's very relational. And it's more a relational network than a really organization. And that's what was growing, a more relational network. And probably that's building from the kind of the top of my skill. I'm not a really good organizational guy. I'm more a building vision, strategic through relation. Maybe that could be one answer. I don't know.
No, it's good. Because, in church planting in Europe, you come across different organizations with different philosophies. And I would say, but the organizations, as with churches, always reflect their leadership in some way,
I think there is another lesson also, because I was in the dawn European leadership in the 90s, European. So I was already had experience of Europe. And I saw immediately, long term, that you can never reach Europe from English. You can only reach Europe in indigenous language and culture. So from the start, the thing was, don't think that what you have are the solution for everybody else. But things that the framework God has given you could be contextualized and be of help in the language and culture of the leader who will carry it. So for me, it has always been identifying leader who can carry the same into their context and not think that there are some brilliant people that have all the solution, because the solution, and that's maybe one of my biggest kind of leadership values, that vision, no, the wisdom is in the body of Christ, not in one person. So by listening to each other, we can find good solution. And I think that's kind of, and by giving everything into the hands of local people, indigenous nation, that's where things will grow and flourish, not by someone from outside coming and doing everything.
That's really good.
Yeah.
It is. Wisdom really is in the body.
Yeah.
One of the things you're doing right now is a chance to look back and reflect. You're doing your Doctor of Ministry
Yes.
part. Why don't you tell us about why would you do that now in this phase of ministry, and what are you hoping to achieve with that?
Yeah, I was challenged by the Bishop of the Anglican Church, Rick Thorpe, Bishop of Islington, and he did the Doctor of Ministry with Asbury in Kentucky, and he challenged me to do a DMin. And I was a little bit hesitant, I have enough to do. But then I thought, okay, if I can do a DMin, Doctor of Ministry, very practical, researching 200, 250 of the churchmen who have gone through M4, that could be a base of learning that we can evaluate and even develop M4 further on. So, because I think in Europe we need to be honest, both with the fruit of church planting and with the methods and how we do it, and critically evaluate, because in the end it's the kingdom expansion that is important, not a method or a training system. So by doing it, I get a feeling of what's reality. And from that reality, it's much better to evaluate from reality than from hunch or I think I know. But research gives you a more clear reality picture. And I think that will help us for the next step of M4 to develop M4 into something that is even more helpful for the nation. That's my hope.
Mm-hmm. And would you encourage other, sometimes people push back against the academic world, What would you say in response to that about taking time to do a DMin or an MDiv or some other degree or some other deeper research?
No, I'm in the 50s. I so enjoy to have 3-4 years now, go in depth, reading more. And because in some way you have enough with the ministry you do, but by putting yourself a little bit under pressure and side, you have to do it. And you are in a system that forces you to really work. And for me, it has been really good. And I think many more should really also do academic work beside of practical ministry and get more, I will say, research-based methodology for also what they do practically. That will be help in the future. So I hope more people within M4 and within church planting field of Europe can take a step of doing a doctoral ministry or more academic work.
Mm-hmm. Good. Tell me a little bit, what's the situation like in M4 today, and what are some of the biggest highlights that you see going on?
Well, good question. I think today, that is in 2024, there are around 170, 80 teams. Someone started last year, someone started this year, someone and next year in training around in Europe. I have been very involved in Ukraine, and I'm amazed of young leader with a faithful and passionate heart to reach people for Christ. And there are 34 teams in training in Ukraine. There will start 12, 15 teams of Ukraine team in training and for training
during the war,
Ukraine, in the midst of the war. Mm-hmm. And that is special for me. And to see that, I learn a lot. Mm-hmm. So for me, that has been very special to follow. But I think there's so much good work done in so many nations. And I know church planting in many nations is not the sexiest topic, honestly. There is also resistance against it. Why should we plant more churches?
Right.
We don't have pastor in our denomination, so we can't allow people to we need them in, like all these questions are there. So in all of the nation, I think is really done a lot of good work. What we do now is we call it, like, I would say, structuring a little bit more, because in the end, of a pioneer phase. In the end, the lack of structure can be what you kill you. So we are trying now to structuring in a healthy way, without not becoming like a big organization. At the same time, multiply everything we do into regions. So in the Northern Europe, in the UK, in the more Southern Europe, in the Central Europe and the Eastern Southern Europe, try to multiply everything we do through local leaders. And that's what I really believe in. We need to push it to the grassroots. Every organization push everything up. My role as a leader is to push everything down to the grassroots.
So what other areas do you see as development that M4 is going through right now, or things that you see in the...
Well, we have some projects that we clearly define. So the one is M4 Ready. Our goal and our dream is to have 1,000 young people on every year training in M4 Ready by next year. So ongoing 1,000, and we form an M4 Ready leadership group. We are planning, we are developing the M4 Ready. So that's the whole recruitment thing will be important into the future. So that's one. We working with all what we call the ABC assessment, basic training, facilitation in the learning community, and also the coaching to bring like the level of expertise, build that up in every of the nation where M4 are, and you know, there's brilliant people working with that, and the whole regionalizing thing, that's important. And then we work with the communication. You know, we have never had any communication kind of work. Now we have a brilliant lady from Estonia working with the kind of developing the whole communication, because people need to hear the story. There's so many encouraging stories happening around in Europe, and people need to hear them. People come with faith, churches are planted, young people in the 20s are taking kind of the passion, going out and reach their own generation, planting new churches. People need to hear the story, and we hope to develop that also with this podcast. And I love that development of getting out the stories. And so that's some of the project that we're working, and the whole measurement system that I do with the M4, with the DMIN, Doctoral Ministry. We want to develop something that we can measure more into every nation, so we have more facts and reality. And based on that, we can make better decisions. So we always make better decisions. So like on facts and listen to the Holy Spirit, listen to God.
Yeah, a little bit of faith in there too.
Yes, absolutely.
So that's where M4 is today. Tell me, 5 years from now, where do you dream M4 might be? Maybe 5 or 10 years from now.
Good question. I don't know. I think if every nation faithfully can follow God with a passion to reach the next generation in planting new churches, amazing things can happen, especially in Europe, because I believe we are in front of I don't say a revival, but I see awakening in the Gen Z and Alpha generation in Europe today, because they are very untouched by the gospel. And they have not all the religious history of Europe. So I believe my dream is to see M4 become a pathway for a young generation reaching their own generation for Christ. It is all about bringing the gospel to new people. And we need to secure a clear understanding of the gospel, because people need the gospel of Christ. Jesus is still the answer for today's people in Europe. And they need to hear it, and they need to meet people in power, in deeds, in words that bring the gospel to them through a living community of faith everywhere. And that's my dream.
So where would you like to see, if you dream or think about M4, what would be said of it, or what would happen 50 years from now? What would you like to have someone hear or say or have found about it?
That's a good question. We started with the family, and Linda and me, planning a church 23 years old. And honestly, I would love to see even my kids and my grandkids and my grandkids follow Jesus. And I would love to see that church planter is not only giving the faith out there, but really giving the faith in there and discipling their own kids. That's the biggest challenge for many of us. So that also is a part of I would dream to see, and really see that the heritage that go out from your own life is continue to follow Jesus Christ. The dynamic of M4 is a little bit uncontrollable, and I love that, because we will say to the nation, if God opens door, go and serve. So in some way, it could be that Spain go to Latin America and serve, and go to other nations, like the French go to French-speaking Africa or whatever. It could be that M4 really move out and are some global stuff, like dream like Alpha, impacting millions of people. That would be a dream. But I will say that's up to God to do, and that's up to willing heart. I don't think I see it more as a movement, an organization, and I see it more releasing people into a church planting ministry. And if M4 is helping as a framework for doing it, well, good. If not, create something new that is helpful. Because it's in the end, it's the kingdom of God. It's not, we will say we are more in love with the bride, the Christ, bride of Christ, than the brand of who we are. Because in the end, it's the kingdom growth. And I think in 50 years, we will see a change in Europe. You know, probably Africa will be 1.5 billion people that follow Christ in some way. And Europe is totally changed because all of the globe are in Europe, and the dynamic, we are a totally cosmopolitan environment, especially in Northern and Southern Europe. It's changing, and it's changing fast. And if not the church understanding and read the time now, we will be left behind. But I think we can, and we can make the opportunity to see a change in Europe for the gospel.
As we wrap up, you have these wonderful people who are listening to this or watching to this. What would you like to say to church planters, potential church planters, donors, whoever is on the other side of that screen right now who is engaging with this podcast? So you can look right into the camera and share some encouraging words or challenge to them.
I was 24 years when I went out with Linda, planted the first church, and I think there are so many thousands of young people who could do it. And I will say, they just need fathers and mothers who say, see them in there and say, you can do it, and we behind you, we support you. So we need to see you as a young generation, just move and do it. But then we see my generation need to take the responsibility as a fathering generation and say, we behind you, we pay you, we resource you, we are behind you. Because it's only the young generation, you, that can reach the next generation. And you are welcome to say, go do it. That's what I would like to say.
Good. Well, thank you, Øivind, for your time today. Thank you for your story and for your leading in M4 over these years. And we look forward to what God's going to do.
It's a privilege.
Thank you for enjoying the podcast, for joining. It's been Øivind and Linda Augland. And we look forward to seeing you next time right here on the M4 podcast.